Jasmine Taylor stood dripping in her living room clutching a towel, while 10 officers pointed guns at her naked body. "She's not our suspect," one whispered. Another officer's radio crackled abort mission. "Target is FBI Director Taylor's daughter. Repeat, abort." Before we dive deeper into this shocking story of injustice, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. Now let's uncover how a routine bath turned into a nightmare that exposed America's deepest systemic problems. Jasmine Taylor sank deeper into her lavender-scented bubble bath, allowing the warm water to wash away the stress of the courtroom. At 28, she had already made a name for herself as one of Atlanta's most promising civil rights attorneys. Today's victory felt particularly sweet, securing a $2 million settlement for the family of Darnell Jackson, an unarmed black teenager shot 7 times during a routine traffic stop. The case had consumed her for months, with the police department fighting tooth and nail to avoid accountability. She took a long sip from her glass of Cabernet, savoring both the rich flavor and the sense of justice served. Her smartphone rested on the bath caddy notifications silenced for the first time in weeks. This moment was hers alone. The contemporary Georgian-style home in the affluent Riverside neighborhood represented everything Jasmine had worked for. Growing up in South Atlanta, with a father in law enforcement and a mother who taught elementary school, Jasmine had defied expectations at every turn. Graduating valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to Howard University, and finishing at the top of her class at Harvard Law. The home, with its gleaming hardwood floors and tasteful artwork, was her reward to herself, a declaration that a black woman could claim space in neighborhoods that had once been explicitly whites only. The gentle playlist of Nina Simone filled the bathroom as Jasmine closed her eyes, mentally reviewing her next cases. The water had just begun to cool when the first crash came. At first, she thought something had fallen downstairs, perhaps the vase her mother had given her as a housewarming gift. Then came the splintering of wood and the thunderous chorus of boots against hardwood. Police search warrant. The bathroom door exploded inward before Jasmine could even stand the lock, giving way as if it were made of paper. 3 officers in tactical gear burst in, weapons raised. "Hands where I can see them." Now instinctively, Jasmine raised her hands, exposing her naked body to the strangers invading her most private space. "What is happening? This is my home." Her legal training kicked in, even as fear flooded her system. "I need to see a warrant." "You have the wrong house." A rough hand grabbed her arm, yanking her from the water without allowing her to cover herself. "Shut up. You can see the warrant when we're done. Suspects always say we have the wrong house." Another officer tossed a small towel at her, barely large enough to cover her torso, let alone provide any real dignity. They dragged her through her own home, leaving puddles of bathwater on the Brazilian cherry floors she had saved for years to install. Family photos lay shattered on the ground, bookcases overturned, cushions slashed open. Outside, more officers had established a perimeter. Neighbors gathered on their manicured lawns, some recording with their phones, others whispering behind cupped hands. Mrs. Peterson from across the street, who had never once returned Jasmine's friendly waves, now had a front-row seat to her humiliation. Sergeant Wade Phillips, a stocky white man with a crew cut and cold blue eyes, supervised as officers handcuffed Jasmine on her own front lawn. "Well, well, what do we have here? Living pretty high on the hog for a drug dealer." His eyes lingered inappropriately as he circled her. "I bet you thought moving to this neighborhood would keep you off our radar. These good folks deserve to know what kind of criminal moved in." Jasmine, despite her trembling, straightened her spine. "I am an attorney with Henderson and Mitchell. You are conducting an illegal search and detention. I demand to see the warrant and speak to your commanding officer immediately." Phillips laughed, turning to his colleagues. "Hear that, boys? She's an attorney, and I'm the King of England." Inside the house, Officer Layla Rodriguez frowned as she examined the search warrant in her hand. The address matched, but something felt off. The warrant described a suspected drug dealer named Jamal Taylor, not Jasmine. The suspect was supposedly a 6'2" male with prior convictions. Looking around the obviously female-occupied home with its law degree prominently displayed in the study, Rodriguez felt a sickening realization dawn. "Sergeant," she called out, stepping onto the porch. "I think we need to verify." Phillips cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Keep searching, Rodriguez. The contraband is here somewhere." Back on the lawn, Jasmine's phone had been confiscated, but continued to ring inside an evidence bag. The screen lit up repeatedly with the same caller ID: Dad, FBI Director. A young officer noticed it first, his eyes widening as he showed it to his partner. The whispers spread quickly through the team until they reached the raid commander, Lieutenant Scott Barnes. Barnes checked the ID himself, then immediately pressed his radio. "All units stand down. Possible mistaken identity." He approached Jasmine, suddenly much more respectful. "Ma'am, is your father Malcolm Taylor, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Director?" Jasmine, shivering in the evening air, her wrists raw from the too tight handcuffs, nodded once. "Yes, and he's going to be very interested in why a tactical team just dragged his daughter naked from her bathtub." The effect was immediate. Officers who had been tearing apart her house moments before now couldn't exit fast enough. Phillips's face drained of color as he backed away, suddenly finding important business elsewhere. Barnes fumbled with the handcuff keys, his confident demeanor evaporated. "There's been a misunderstanding. We had information that Save It Jasmine cut him off, rubbing her wrists as the cuffs fell away. Every second of this is going to be scrutinized in court." As the officers retreated to their vehicles, Jasmine stood alone on her lawn, clutching the inadequate towel around her body. Neighbors, still recording every moment of her humiliation. The violation felt total. Her home, her dignity, her sense of security, all shattered in minutes. What she didn't know yet was that this mistake would unravel a conspiracy reaching far beyond her Atlanta suburb, one that would expose the darkest corners of American justice. FBI Director Malcolm Taylor sat at the head of the National Security Council table, his imposing 6'4" frame commanding attention even among the assembled military and intelligence leaders. As the first black man to hold the position, his 27-year journey through the Bureau had been marked by excellence and perseverance against institutional barriers that had bent but never broken his resolve. The discussion about emerging domestic terror threats paused when his secure phone vibrated against his leg. Malcolm rarely received calls on this line during high-level meetings, and never from his daughter, whose name flashed on the screen. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he said, stepping into the adjacent secure room. "Jasmine, what's wrong?" The moment he heard her voice, usually so composed and confident, now trembling with a mixture of fury and shock, his blood ran cold. "Dad, they broke into my house. Police. A SWAT team dragged me out of my bathtub at gunpoint. They handcuffed me outside in front of everyone. They only stopped when they saw your name on my phone." Malcolm's decades of training in remaining calm during crises was tested as never before. "Are you hurt? Are you safe now?" "Physically, I'm okay. They're gone. But my house." Her voice broke. "Everything's destroyed, Dad. They slashed my furniture, broke my photos of Mom. I'm standing in my living room with just a towel, and my front door doesn't even close anymore." Malcolm checked his watch. "I'm leaving Washington now. I'll be there in 2 hours. Document everything. Take photos. Don't clean anything up. Call Walter Henderson." As Malcolm ended the call and returned to the meeting to make his apologies, Jasmine stood in the wreckage of her home. She followed her father's instructions mechanically, her lawyer's mind taking over as she photographed the destruction with her recovered phone. The splintered bathroom door, the slashed cushions, the empty drawers and broken picture frames. Her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, who had always been kind unlike the other neighbors, came to the door with clothes and a genuine concern that cut through Jasmine's shock. "I saw what happened, child. It wasn't right. I recorded some of it too, if you need it." Mrs. Wilson helped her contact the local news station where her niece worked as a producer. By the time Malcolm's government vehicle pulled up to the house, 3 news vans had already stationed themselves outside the property. The neighbors, who had been so eager to witness Jasmine's humiliation, now retreated behind closed doors and drawn curtains. Malcolm Taylor arrived not in his usual tailored suit, but in jeans and a polo shirt. A father first, FBI director second. He embraced his daughter tightly before assessing the damage to her home with the methodical eye of a career investigator. "They knew exactly who I was," Jasmine said, now dressed in sweats borrowed from Mrs. Wilson. "The way that sergeant looked at me. This wasn't a mistake, Dad." Before Malcolm could respond, another government vehicle pulled up. Police Chief Gregory Hartman emerged, a polished smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Malcolm had met him at various law enforcement conferences, a political creature who'd risen through the ranks on charm and connections rather than investigative skill. Director Taylor, Miss Taylor, I came personally to express the department's sincerest apologies for this unfortunate mix-up. His voice oozed insincerity. There was a clerical error in the warrant processing. The officer who verified the address has been suspended pending investigation. Jasmine, now in attorney mode, crossed her arms. "I'd like to see the warrant, Chief Hartman, and the probable cause affidavit that supported it, and all officer body camera footage from the raid." Hartman's smile flickered. "Of course, though, there may have been some technical issues with the body cameras. These things happen in high-stress, tactical situations." He lowered his voice, glancing at Malcolm. "Director, given your position, I'm sure we all want to handle this discreetly. National security considerations and all that." Malcolm's expression remained neutral, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Chief Hartman, let me be very clear. My daughter is a private citizen whose civil rights appear to have been grossly violated. There will be nothing discreet about our pursuit of accountability. I expect every document related to this raid on my desk by morning, and I expect all evidence to be preserved, completely." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Hartman's facade cracked slightly, revealing a flash of something harder beneath. "Of course, Director. We have nothing to hide." The confrontation was interrupted by Jasmine's phone ringing, Walter Henderson, managing partner at her law firm. As she stepped away to take the call, Malcolm continued. "One more thing, Chief. When your officers realized who Jasmine was, they fled, rather than securing her home, or ensuring her safety after destroying her security. That suggests they knew immediately that something was very wrong with this raid. I'm curious to know why." Despite attempts to keep the incident quiet, video footage taken by neighbors had already hit social media. Local news picked up the story first. Prominent civil rights attorney subjected to mistaken police raid. By morning, national outlets had caught on with headlines questioning why Jasmine Taylor had been targeted. The hashtag number Bathing While Black trended nationally alongside number Justice for Jasmine. As dawn broke, Malcolm sat at Jasmine's kitchen table reviewing the warrant documents that had been reluctantly delivered. His face grew increasingly troubled as he studied the paperwork. The informant testimony is vague, the address verification is sloppy, and the judge who signed this. He looked up at Jasmine, who was finally sleeping on the couch after her traumatic night. His daughter had fought her whole life against the same system he had worked within, believing it could be reformed from the inside. He had always respected her path, even when it put them at philosophical odds. Now, looking at the suspicious warrant in his hands, Malcolm Taylor faced the possibility that his daughter had been right all along, and that someone had deliberately targeted her because of it. What kind of justice system allows armed officers to invade an innocent woman's home based on flimsy evidence? How many others have suffered similar violations without the protection of a powerful parent? Jasmine Taylor pondered these questions as she entered the sleek downtown offices of Henderson and Mitchell, where she'd built her reputation defending victims of police misconduct. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now found herself on the other side of the cases she typically handled. The reception area fell silent as she walked through colleagues and staff, watching with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. News of the raid had spread through Atlanta's legal community like wildfire. Walter Henderson, the firm's 62-year-old founding partner and Jasmine's mentor since law school, waited in his corner office. Unlike most of the city's prominent attorneys, Henderson had built his career representing those failed by the system rather than corporations. His silver hair and distinguished appearance belied a fighter's spirit that had earned both admiration and enemies throughout Georgia's legal establishment. "Jasmine," he said, rising to embrace her, "I've already filed emergency motions for preservation of evidence and expedited discovery. Those bastards picked the wrong woman to terrorize." His righteous anger was exactly what Jasmine needed, validation that her trauma warranted outrage. They destroyed my home, Walter. Violated my privacy. Humiliated me in front of neighbors who already looked at me like I didn't belong. She sank into a chair, the exhaustion of the past 24 hours finally catching up with her. And if my father wasn't who he is, I'd just be another black woman, claiming police misconduct, fighting for years for the smallest acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Thomas Mitchell, the firm's other named partner, entered without knocking. Younger than Henderson and more politically connected, Mitchell had always represented the pragmatic counterweight to Henderson's idealism. "This is exploding online," he said, handing Jasmine a tablet open to Twitter. "You're the #1 trending topic nationally. Police unions are already circling wagons, but the court of public opinion is squarely in your corner." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "We need to think strategically here, Jasmine. Your father's position complicates things. Taking on the Atlanta PD means political blowback that could affect his effectiveness at the Bureau." Jasmine looked up sharply. "Are you suggesting I stay quiet about what happened to me? Because my father has a powerful job." Mitchell raised his hands defensively. "I'm suggesting we consider all angles before charging forward. This could affect national security operations if it creates friction between the FBI and local law enforcement." Henderson scoffed. "The only friction should be the sound of police leadership being dragged out of their offices for allowing this to happen." We proceed at full speed. Across town, Malcolm Taylor faced his own political minefield at the FBI's Atlanta field office. Director of National Intelligence Victoria Chamberlain had flown in from Washington ostensibly to discuss ongoing domestic terrorism cases, but her real purpose became clear once they were alone. "Malcolm, you need to recuse yourself from any involvement in investigating this incident," she said without preamble. Tall and impeccably dressed with short-cropped gray hair, Chamberlain had spent 30 years navigating Washington's power structures. The optics are problematic. You can't be seen using federal resources to address a personal matter. Malcolm's expression remained professional, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "With respect, Victoria, I have no intention of directing FBI resources toward this, but I won't pretend it didn't happen either. My daughter's civil rights were violated in a manner that suggests either gross incompetence or deliberate targeting." Chamberlain nodded, seemingly satisfied. "To avoid even the appearance of conflict, I'm assigning Agent Diana Chen to conduct an independent review. She'll report directly to me, not you." Malcolm recognized the move for what it was, Chamberlain ensuring she controlled whatever information emerged from any investigation. Agent Chen was known for her thoroughness, but also for her political acumen. She wouldn't rock institutional boats without ironclad evidence. "Fine. But I want regular briefings on her findings." Of course, Chamberlain agreed too easily. "Now, about these domestic terror threats." Meanwhile, across the city, at Atlanta Police Department's 3rd Precinct officer, Layla Rodriguez, sat alone in her patrol car debating the decision that could end her 8-year career. The raid on Jasmine Taylor's home had felt wrong from the start, the rushed briefing, the insistence on a no-knock entry. Despite minimal threat assessment, Sergeant Phillips' unusual eagerness to lead the operation. Personally. Now, reviewing her notes from that night, the discrepancies were impossible to ignore. The warrant had been for Jamal Taylor, supposedly a 6'2" male with prior drug convictions. Yet the house clearly belonged to a single professional woman. The probable cause had been vague, an unnamed confidential informant claiming to have purchased drugs at the address within the past 72 hours. Most troubling was how quickly everyone had scattered once Jasmine's connection to the FBI director was discovered. No one had followed proper procedures for terminating a search operation. No one had secured the scene or documented why they were leaving. It was as if they'd been caught doing something they knew was wrong. Rodriguez made her decision. She drove to the address she'd found in the law firm's public records and parked across the street. 20 minutes later, Jasmine emerged from Henderson and Mitchell's offices. Rodriguez approached her cautiously. "Miss Taylor, Officer Layla Rodriguez. I was part of the team that—" She couldn't finish the sentence, shame coloring her face. "I know who you are," Jasmine replied coldly. "You stood by while your colleagues dragged me half-naked from my bath." Rodriguez flinched but held her ground. "I'm here because something wasn't right about that raid." The warrant was pushed through unusually fast. Normal verification procedures were skipped, and Sergeant Phillips specifically requested to lead the operation based on what he called reliable information that he wouldn't share with the rest of the team. Jasmine studied the officer's face, looking for deception. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I became a cop to protect people, not terrorize them. Whatever happened last night wasn't about law enforcement. It was something else." She handed Jasmine a flash drive. "This has the real dispatch logs and the original warrant application before it was revised. There's a big difference between them." As Rodriguez walked away, Jasmine called after her, "They'll come after you for this." The officer paused without turning around. "I know, but I couldn't live with myself if I said nothing." Back at his hotel, Malcolm received an anonymous text message from a blocked number. "Keep your daughter quiet, or next time won't be a mistake." He immediately initiated security protocols arranging for protection details for both himself and Jasmine without going through official bureau channels. He trusted his closest agents, but the text suggested that whoever was behind the raid had connections and was monitoring their communications. At Henderson and Mitchell, Jasmine's paralegal Zoe Washington made a discovery while organizing case files. Jasmine the First noticed something weird. All 5 police brutality cases you've won in the past year involved officers from the same precinct, the 3rd. And guess which precinct executed the raid on your house, Jasmine? Connected the dots immediately. The 3rd. This wasn't random. They targeted me because of my cases against them. As the pieces began falling into place, neither Jasmine nor her father noticed the dark sedan parked across from her law office, its driver photographing everyone entering and leaving the building. Inside the vehicle, Sergeant Wade Phillips lowered his camera and spoke into a secure phone line. "She's meeting with the Rodriguez woman. We have a problem." The voice that responded was cultured, authoritative, and coldly angry. "Then solve it, Sergeant. You assured me this operation would be clean. Now clean up your mess." Comment number 1, if you believe Officer Rodriguez is brave for coming forward with evidence, or number 2, if you think she's betraying her fellow officers. Like this video if you've ever had to make a difficult moral choice between loyalty and doing what's right. Subscribe to see how this conspiracy unfolds in our next segment. What exactly was in those dispatch logs that Officer Rodriguez risked her career to share, and who sent that threatening text to FBI Director Taylor? The truth goes deeper than anyone imagined. The morning after her meeting with Officer Rodriguez, Jasmine woke to her face plastered across every news channel in America. Overnight, the story had transformed from local outrage to national controversy. CNN featured legal experts debating police accountability, while Fox News questioned whether Jasmine was exploiting her father's position. Her phone had hundreds of missed calls, journalists, activists, and even celebrities expressing support. Walter Henderson had arranged for her to appear on American Morning with host Rebecca Chen, whose reputation for tough but fair interviews made her show a respected forum for national discussions. Sitting in the green room, Jasmine reviewed talking points with the media consultant Henderson had insisted she work with. "Remember, stick to your personal experience," the consultant advised. "Don't let them bait you into broader political statements that could be taken out of context." The interview began with footage from the raid, shaky cell phone video taken by neighbors showing Jasmine in handcuffs clutching a towel as officers swarmed her property. Chen's first question cut straight to the heart. "Miss Taylor, beyond the obvious humiliation, what was going through your mind during this ordeal?" Jasmine took a deep breath. "Fear, confusion, and then anger. But mostly I kept thinking about my clients, people who've experienced similar violations without the privilege of having an FBI director as a father or a law degree to understand their rights. If this could happen to me with all my advantages, what hope do ordinary citizens have?" The answer resonated powerfully. Within hours, clips from the interview went viral with Jasmine's words about privilege and protection, sparking intense online debates about accountability in policing. The hashtag number "What Hope Do They Have?" joined number "Justice for Jasmine" in trending topics. That afternoon, Atlanta Police Chief Gregory Hartman held a hastily arranged press conference flanked by departmental attorneys and union representatives. His prepared statement walked a careful line between acknowledgement and deflection. The Atlanta Police Department deeply regrets the distress caused to Ms. Taylor during this unfortunate incident. We are conducting a thorough internal investigation into the procedural errors that led to this mistaken address verification. He adjusted his tie before continuing. However, I want to emphasize that our officers were acting in good faith based on information provided to them. Sergeant Phillips has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, though we caution against a rush to judgment. The questions from reporters turned combative when Hartman refused to release body camera footage, citing technical malfunctions and ongoing investigation protocols. When asked directly about allegations that Jasmine had been targeted for her legal work against the department, Hartman's facade momentarily cracked. Miss Taylor has made a career of demonizing police officers who risk their lives daily to keep this city safe. While we regret this incident, perhaps she now understands the split-second decisions officers must make in uncertain situations. The comment, clearly unscripted, drew audible gasps from the press corps and immediate condemnation on social media. Henderson and Mitchell issued a statement within the hour. Chief Hartman's remarks betray a disturbing mindset that views constitutional violations as acceptable collateral damage. His suggestion that our colleague somehow deserved this treatment confirms what the evidence increasingly shows. This was not a mistake, but retaliation against an effective civil rights attorney. Malcolm Taylor faced his own political tightrope walk. As FBI director, he needed to maintain working relationships with local law enforcement agencies nationwide. As Jasmine's father, he wanted nothing more than to bring the full force of federal investigation down on the Atlanta PD. His position allowed him certain privileges, like quietly accessing Sergeant Wade Phillips' personnel file without going through official channels. What he found disturbed him deeply. Phillips had 16 excessive force complaints in his 14-year career, 12 from black citizens. None had resulted in discipline beyond mandatory counseling. More concerning were the neighborhoods where these incidents occurred, predominantly in transitioning areas where black professionals had recently moved into previously white enclaves. Malcolm's private investigation also revealed that Phillips owned a vacation property well beyond what his police salary should afford, purchased 3 years ago with cash. These facts alone weren't proof of corruption, but they formed a pattern that any experienced investigator would flag for deeper scrutiny. In downtown Atlanta, community activists organized a rally outside the 3rd Precinct. Jasmine had been reluctant to attend, worried her presence might shift focus from the broader issues to her personal story. Walter Henderson disagreed. "Your story is powerful precisely because it connects to the larger pattern. You have a platform now, use it." When Jasmine arrived at the rally, she was surprised by the diversity of the crowd. Elderly black residents stood alongside white college students. Local business owners and church groups carried signs demanding accountability. What truly affected her, though, were the other victims who approached her one by one, people who had experienced similar mistaken raids but whose stories had never made headlines. Mrs. Eliza Jackson, an 82-year-old grandmother, gripped Jasmine's hands with surprising strength. "They came to my house last year, said they had reports of drug dealing, tore up everything I owned. Found nothing, of course, never even apologized." Her eyes, clouded with cataracts but sharp with intelligence, held Jasmine's gaze. "Nobody believed me. No news cameras came for Eliza Jackson. But they believe you, child. Make them listen." The stories accumulated throughout the afternoon. A black pediatrician whose medical bag had been claimed as drug paraphernalia, a history professor whose academic books on civil rights were confiscated as radical literature, a software engineer handcuffed in front of his children while officers searched for a suspect who looked nothing like him. The common thread: all lived in affluent neighborhoods where they were among the few black residents. All had experienced raids within months of moving in. None had received justice or even acknowledgement of wrongdoing. As the rally continued, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Call me immediately." "Secure line." She stepped away from the crowd to phone him. What's happened? Malcolm's voice was tight with controlled anger. I just received an encrypted message from Justice Department Deputy Director Lawrence Coleman. It said only, "This goes higher than you think. Watch your back. Not everyone at the Bureau is on your side." Jasmine processed this. Coleman was an old friend of her father's, someone who had been with the Justice Department for decades. What does that mean? That the FBI is somehow involved in what happened to me? I don't know, Malcolm admitted. But Coleman wouldn't risk contacting me like this unless he had serious concerns. Whatever's happening, it's not just a local police department with a grudge against a civil rights attorney. There's something bigger at play. As Jasmine rejoined the rally, her legal training kicked in, mentally cataloging every piece of this expanding puzzle: the targeted raid, Phillips' suspicious finances, the pattern of similar incidents against black professionals in white neighborhoods, her father's warning. Someone powerful wanted her silenced, which only made her more determined to uncover exactly what they were hiding. The morning sky over Atlanta was heavy with storm clouds as Agent Diana Chen reviewed the warrant documentation for the Taylor raid. Recruited from the FBI's Civil Rights Division for her meticulous attention to detail, Chen had built her reputation on cases others considered too complex or politically sensitive. This investigation was proving to be both. Sitting in her temporary office at the Atlanta field office, she frowned at the inconsistencies in the paper trail. The initial warrant application cited a confidential informant claiming drug sales at the address, but provided no supporting surveillance or verification. The judge who had signed it, Harold Whitmore, had approved the warrant in under 30 minutes, practically unheard of for a no-knock raid authorization. Most concerning was that the address verification form showed different handwriting in the sections listing occupant details, suggesting it had been altered after initial submission. Chen gathered her materials and drove to the courthouse to interview Judge Whitmore personally. The judicial assistant blocked her path with practiced efficiency. "Judge Whitmore is in court all day. You'll need to make an appointment for next week." Chen displayed her FBI credentials. "This is a priority federal investigation. I need 10 minutes between cases." The assistant's smile never wavered. "As I said, Agent Chen, you'll need to make an appointment. Court security has been instructed not to allow interruptions today." Every bureaucratic barrier Chen encountered increased her suspicion. Judges typically cooperated with federal agents as professional courtesy. This stonewalling suggested Whitmore had been warned about her inquiry. Meanwhile, at Henderson and Mitchell, Jasmine and her legal team filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the Atlanta Police Department. The complaint alleged civil rights violations, excessive force abuse of power, and conspiracy to violate constitutional protections. The filing included affidavits from neighbors who had witnessed the raid, preliminary evidence from Officer Rodriguez, and detailed documentation of the damage to Jasmine's home. The deposition phase began immediately with the legal team securing an emergency court order to expedite discovery. Sergeant Wade Phillips sat across from Jasmine and Walter Henderson in the firm's conference room, his police union attorney by his side. Despite being placed on administrative leave, Phillips maintained an arrogant demeanor, answering questions with barely concealed contempt. "Describe the intelligence that led to the raid on Miss Evan, to Heaven, Taylor's home," Henderson began. Phillips leaned back in his chair. "A confidential informant provided specific information about drug distribution at that address. The informant had proven reliable in previous investigations. This informant claimed to have purchased drugs from a 6'2" male named Jamal Taylor, correct? Yet you raided the home of a 5'6" female attorney named Jasmine Taylor. Dealers use aliases and associates. The address matched our information." Henderson pressed further. "Did you conduct any surveillance to confirm the informant's claims? Any controlled buys to verify drug activity? We had sufficient probable cause without additional verification." "And who was this informant?" the union attorney intervened. "My client cannot reveal confidential informant identities. That's standard procedure for officer and informant safety." As the deposition continued, officers gave contradicting accounts of who had provided the initial intelligence and how the raid had been authorized. Some claimed the information came through standard channels. Others said Phillips had personally vouched for the informant's reliability. None could explain why normal verification procedures had been bypassed or why body cameras had simultaneously malfunctioned across multiple officers. Back at the precinct, Officer Rodriguez found herself increasingly isolated. Former friends avoided her in the hallways. Her locker had been vandalized with the word "rat" spray-painted across it. That morning she had found a dead rat on the hood of her car in the secure police parking lot, a message that could only have come from fellow officers. Despite the intimidation, Rodriguez continued her quiet investigation. Working late one night, she accessed the records room, using a colleague's forgotten keycard. What she found confirmed her worst suspicions. Phillips had maintained a separate, unofficial list of addresses under surveillance, all belonging to successful black professionals who had recently moved into predominantly white neighborhoods. The surveillance justifications were telling suspicious vehicle patterns consistent with drug activity for a neurosurgeon's Mercedes. Unusual number of visitors for a professor who hosted book club meetings. Anonymous neighborhood complaints for a tech executive whose only crime appeared to be renovating his historic home. Most disturbing was finding Jasmine's address on the list added 3 months earlier with the note, "Connection to known anti-police elements. High priority observation." Malcolm Taylor, working through his own channels, discovered an unsettling pattern connecting targeted raids across multiple jurisdictions. In Charlotte, Memphis, Nashville, and Birmingham, similar incidents had occurred. Black professionals in affluent neighborhoods subjected to aggressive raids that found nothing criminal but effectively sent a message about who was unwelcome. The connection wasn't in police departments themselves, but in their technology provider. Each department had contracted with Sentinel Solutions, a private security firm that provided predictive policing software to law enforcement agencies nationwide. The software allegedly used algorithms to identify crime patterns and potential hotspots, helping departments allocate resources efficiently. However, Malcolm's investigation revealed that Sentinel's algorithm weighed factors like neighborhood demographic changes and property value fluctuations in its crime predictions, seemingly neutral terms that in practice meant flagging areas where racial composition was changing. More concerning was discovering that Sentinel Solutions had been founded by former intelligence community officials, including some with ties to Victoria Chamberlain's previous postings at the Department of Homeland Security. The company had received substantial government contracts with minimal competitive bidding justified under national security exemptions. While Malcolm was connecting these dots, Jasmine returned home from a long day of depositions to find her front door slightly ajar. The security company had installed a new system after the raid, including cameras that should have captured any visitors. Yet the security panel showed the system had been disarmed 20 minutes earlier using a valid code. Moving cautiously through her home, Jasmine noted subtle signs of intrusion. Nothing was obviously damaged or stolen, but items had been moved. Books slightly out of alignment, a drawer not fully closed. In her home office, her case files had been rifled through, focused particularly on her recent police misconduct cases. When she entered her bedroom, she stopped cold. On her pillow sat a single chess piece, a black queen, an unmistakable message that she was being watched and that someone could reach her in her most private spaces. She backed out of the room and called her father. "I'm not staying here tonight," she told him once she was safely outside. "Someone's been in my house." They knew the security code. Within 30 minutes, Malcolm had arranged for a secure hotel room under a false name and dispatched trusted agents to process Jasmine's home for evidence. The chess piece was bagged and sent for fingerprint and DNA analysis, though both Malcolm and Jasmine suspected they would find nothing. This had been too professional, too deliberate to leave obvious traces. As Jasmine settled into the anonymous hotel room, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Black queens fall first in this game. Ask yourself who's really moving the pieces." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a disturbing picture, one that suggested the raid on Jasmine's home had been merely the opening move in a much larger and more dangerous game. Have you ever discovered that what you believed was random misfortune was actually a calculated attack? How would you respond if you learned powerful institutions were conspiring against you simply because of your race and success? For Jasmine Taylor, These weren't hypothetical questions, but her new reality. After the break-in at her home, Malcolm insisted she enter protective custody at a secure FBI safehouse outside Atlanta. The modest ranch-style home in an unassuming suburb was under 24-hour surveillance with trusted agents personally vetted by Malcolm. Here, Jasmine set up a makeshift legal war room, the dining table covered with documents and laptops, as she coordinated with Henderson and Mitchell remotely. Walter Henderson had assigned their top investigative team to the case, including Zoe Washington, whose background in data analytics before law school made her exceptionally skilled at identifying patterns in seemingly unrelated information. Zoe had compiled social media information on all key players, including Judge Harold Whitmore, who had signed the questionable warrant. "I've been cross-referencing public appearances and social connections," Zoe explained during their secure video conference. "Look at these photos from the Piedmont Golf Club charity tournament 3 months ago." The images showed Judge Whitmore laughing comfortably with Police Chief Hartman. They're not just professional acquaintances. They're in the same weekly golf foursome, along with several prominent real estate developers, and this man, Richard Mercer, CEO of Sentinel Solutions. Jasmine studied the images. So the judge who rubber-stamped the warrant socializes with the police chief and the head of a company that provides predictive policing software. That's a connection worth exploring, but not necessarily proof of. Conspiracy. There's more, Zoe continued. I found these photos buried in a community newsletter archive. She shared images from a neighborhood association meeting in Riverside, Jasmine's own community. Both Whitmore and Hartman appeared in group photos, identified as special advisors to the association. They both have direct connections to your neighborhood. And look at the date. This meeting happened 2 weeks before you closed on your house. The implications were clear. People with power in law enforcement had been aware of Jasmine moving into the predominantly white neighborhood from the beginning. Meanwhile, Agent Chen's independent investigation was hitting resistance at every turn. After being blocked from interviewing Judge Whitmore, she had attempted to access Sentinel Solutions' contract with the Atlanta Police Department. The request was denied, citing proprietary algorithms and trade secrets. When she escalated to her FBI superiors, she was told to focus on procedural errors in the raid rather than the broader contracting relationships. Frustrated, Chen bypassed the official channels and reached out directly to a contact in the Financial Crimes Division. I need to know where the money goes, she explained over coffee, in a nondescript diner miles from any government building. Sentinel Solutions has contracts with police departments in 37 cities. That's hundreds of millions in government money. Follow the payments. Within days, her persistence yielded results. The financial analysis revealed a complex web of shell companies and subsidiaries. Sentinel Solutions officially paid consulting fees to firms with generic names like Urban Security Advisors and Metropolitan Risk Management. These firms in turn made payments to smaller entities owned by various public officials, including companies registered to relatives of Judge Whitmore and Chief Hartman. Most interesting was the discovery that Victoria Chamberlain, Malcolm's boss, and the Director of National Intelligence had received advisory board compensation from one of these shell companies before taking her government position. She had never disclosed this relationship during her confirmation process. Malcolm confronted Chamberlain in her Washington office, placing the financial documents on her desk without preamble. Care to explain why you're receiving payments from a company connected to the raid on my daughter's home? Chamberlain's expression remained neutral, though her eyes hardened. Those payments were for legitimate consulting work before I entered this position. I'm disappointed you're conducting unauthorized investigations using bureau resources for a personal matter. This stopped being just personal when I found evidence of systemic targeting of black citizens and corruption reaching into federal agencies, Malcolm replied. Sentinel Solutions has created a high-tech version of redlining using predictive policing to harass minorities in white neighborhoods. And you've been taking their money. Chamberlain leaned forward. Malcolm, you're a smart man. Too smart to throw away your career on conspiracy theories. Sentinel provides valuable tools for keeping communities safe. If some officers misuse that technology, that's a training issue, not a conspiracy. Her tone softened slightly. The world is complicated. Maintaining order sometimes requires approaches that don't fit neatly into idealistic notions of justice. Your daughter's incident was unfortunate, but pushing this further risks undermining public trust in institutions we both serve. The implicit threat was clear: back off or face consequences. Are you threatening me, Victoria? I'm advising you as a colleague. There are powerful people who believe in Sentinel's mission. They won't appreciate you connecting dots that should remain disconnected. As Malcolm left Chamberlain's office, his secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from a number he didn't recognize. Parking garage. Level Bay Tway. 10 minutes. Come alone. Normally, Malcolm would never respond to such a message, but the timing immediately after his confrontation with Chamberlain couldn't be coincidence. In the dimly lit corner of the parking level, Officer Rodriguez waited nervously beside a rental car with tinted windows. "Director Taylor," she said quietly, "I took a significant risk coming here. After they discovered I'd accessed restricted files, there was an incident during patrol. A suspect my partner and I were pursuing suddenly had a gun, according to my partner, a gun that never materialized. I could have shot an unarmed man based on my partner's shout. It was a setup to either make me shoot an innocent person or get me killed for hesitating." She handed him a flash drive. "These are server access codes to Sentinel's database. I found them in Philip's desk when they had me clear out his things after the suspension. He wasn't just using their software. He had administrator access." Malcolm studied the young officer. "You understand what you're doing by giving me this. Your career is already over," she finished. "They know I talked to your daughter. It's just a matter of time before they manufacture a reason to fire me, or worse. At least this way what's happening might actually stop." Back in Atlanta, Jasmine narrowly escaped an attempt on her life when her FBI protection detail spotted a sniper setting up on a rooftop opposite her law office during a brief, supposedly secret visit to collect files. The would-be assassin escaped, but left behind a high-powered rifle with custom modifications traced to military contractors who supplied equipment to Sentinel's private security division. With Rodriguez's access codes, Malcolm's technical team infiltrated Sentinel's secure servers. What they found was more disturbing than even his worst suspicions: documentation of Operation Neighborhood. Watch a classified program using predictive policing algorithms not just to identify crime, but to actively discourage demographic changes in stable, high-value communities. The program materials spoke of maintaining community standards and preserving property values, but the operational directives were explicit: identify and create pretexts to investigate minorities moving into predominantly white neighborhoods, with special attention to high-profile individuals who might attract others of similar background. Most damning was an internal assessment report that quantified success in terms of demographic stability maintenance, measuring how many targeted individuals subsequently moved out of these neighborhoods after police interventions. Jasmine's name appeared in a high-priority target list, along with notes about her civil rights cases against the department and her potential negative influence on community relations with law enforcement. The program went far beyond Atlanta, with similar operations documented in dozens of cities nationwide. What had happened to Jasmine wasn't a mistake or even simple retaliation. It was the deliberate implementation of a modern, technology-enabled version of the racial intimidation tactics that had enforced residential segregation for generations. Comment number 1. If you believe technology is making discrimination more sophisticated rather than eliminating it, or number 2, if you think exposing these systems is the first step to dismantling them. Like this video if you're shocked by how deep institutional racism can run in America. Subscribe to see how Jasmine and Malcolm fight back against this nationwide conspiracy. The revelation of Operation Neighborhood Watch explains the targeting, but who authorized such a program? And with enemies in the highest levels of government, how can Jasmine and Malcolm expose the truth without becoming permanent targets themselves? The secure FBI facility outside Quantico hummed with activity as Malcolm Taylor assembled his trusted team. After discovering Operation Neighborhood Watch, he knew he couldn't rely on official channels. The conspiracy reached too high into government and law enforcement hierarchies. Victoria Chamberlain had effectively isolated him within the Bureau, limiting his access and authority under the guise of preventing conflicts of interest in his daughter's case. Department heads suddenly found reasons to reschedule meetings. Routine intelligence briefings were redirected to deputies. His security clearance remained intact, but the subtle message was clear. He was being sidelined. Malcolm had anticipated this and prepared accordingly. Over his 27-year career, he had cultivated relationships with agents valued for both their skills and their integrity. This shadow team now gathered in a conference room officially reserved for a training exercise communications secured against surveillance. "Everything we do from this point forward is unofficial," Malcolm told the assembled group. "Anyone uncomfortable with that should leave now. There will be no official protection if this goes sideways." No one moved. Agent Ramirez, a cyber intelligence specialist, spoke first. "The Sentinel system is sophisticated but not impenetrable. Using Officer Rodriguez's access codes, we've mapped their entire operation. They're selling predictive policing software to departments nationwide, but the algorithms have hidden parameters specifically designed to flag successful minorities in white neighborhoods as potential criminals." Agent Washington, an analyst with military intelligence background, continued. "The system generates probable cause by manipulating data. If a black homeowner in a targeted area has frequent visitors, the algorithm categorizes it as potential drug activity. Home renovations become suspicious financial transactions. Even routine deliveries can be flagged as unusual patterns consistent with contraband shipments." "Who authorized this program?" Malcolm asked. "That's where it gets complicated," Agent Chen replied. "The official documentation lists only code names, but financial trails connect to a think tank called the American Community Stability Institute. Their public materials discuss neighborhood preservation and cultural continuity, dog whistles for preventing racial integration. Their board includes former intelligence officials, retired judges, and property developers with interests in maintaining certain neighborhood demographics." While Malcolm built his case from within the system, Jasmine leveraged her legal expertise and growing public platform to create external pressure. Her appearance on national news programs had made her the face of a movement larger than her individual case. Working from secure locations, she coordinated with Henderson and Mitchell to expand their lawsuit into a class action representing dozens of victims of similar mistaken raids across multiple jurisdictions. The firm established a secure tip line that quickly filled with accounts from black professionals who had experienced harassment after moving into predominantly white neighborhoods. The pattern was consistent: minor code violations, aggressively enforced, suspicious police patrols, noise complaints for normal activities, and in the most egregious cases, home raids based on anonymous tips that never yielded contraband. Walter Henderson held a press conference announcing the expanded lawsuit with victims from 5 states present to share their experiences. What happened to Jasmine Taylor was not an isolated incident or a simple mistake, Henderson told the assembled press. It was part of a systematic campaign to intimidate successful black citizens who dare to live in certain neighborhoods. Today, we are filing a federal class action lawsuit alleging civil rights violations, illegal surveillance, abuse of power, and conspiracy against every department using Sentinel Solutions software for racial targeting. The public response was immediate and powerful. Community rallies formed in cities across the country. Civil rights organizations called for congressional hearings. Technology watchdog groups demanded algorithmic transparency from police departments using predictive software. But the opposition quickly mobilized its considerable resources. Conservative media outlets portrayed the lawsuit as an attack on law enforcement and questioned the motives of activist attorneys. Police unions issued statements defending predictive policing as race-neutral technology and claiming that any disparities in enforcement resulted from objective crime data. Death threats poured in to Henderson and Mitchell, forcing them to hire private security. The firm's website suffered sophisticated cyber attacks. Walter Henderson's home was vandalized with racial slurs spray-painted across his garage door. The pressure extended to personal relationships. Thomas Mitchell, the more politically cautious of the firm's partners, approached Jasmine with concerns. Major clients are threatening to pull their business, he explained during a secure video call. The governor's office has hints that our state contracts could be reevaluated. We're looking at millions in potential losses. Jasmine understood the subtext. You want me to settle the case, Mitchell sighed. I want us to consider all options. This has become bigger than one raid or even one pattern of discrimination. We're taking on power structures that have resources we can't match. Power structures that are actively harming our clients, Jasmine countered. If we back down because it's difficult, what message does that send to every black citizen who's been terrorized in their own home? What was all our work for, if not this moment? The conversation ended without resolution, but Jasmine sensed the growing pressure from all sides. Meanwhile, Officer Rodriguez had been arrested on charges of evidence, tampering, and obstruction of justice. The department claimed to have found cocaine in her locker during a random inspection, an inspection led by Sergeant Phillips, despite his supposed administrative leave. When Jasmine attempted to represent Rodriguez, Judge Whitmore was mysteriously assigned to the case and immediately ruled that Jasmine had a conflict of interest due to her lawsuit against the department. Rodriguez was held on unusually high bail, effectively silencing a key witness. Malcolm's investigation continued despite the obstacles. His team uncovered documents linking Sentinel Solutions to a think tank called the American Neighborhood Preservation Council, which advocated what they termed demographic stability in suburban communities. While their public materials used carefully coded language about preserving community character, internal communications were explicit about preventing racial integration to maintain property values and cultural cohesion. The financial connections completed the picture. Real estate developers funded the think tank, which influenced policy at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which in turn provided grants to police departments for community stability initiatives implemented through Sentinel's technology. It was social engineering disguised as law enforcement, using taxpayer money to enforce a modern version of redlining. The investigation reached a crisis point when Jasmine, against security protocols, arranged to meet privately with Officer Rodriguez's attorney at the county detention center. Malcolm's protective detail objected strenuously, but Jasmine insisted on supporting the officer who had risked everything to expose the truth. It's a controlled environment with security everywhere, she argued. And this meeting is officially attorney-client privileged. What she didn't know was that Sergeant Phillips had anticipated this move. He arranged for a prisoner transfer that would cross paths with Jasmine in an isolated corridor of the facility. Malcolm's team, monitoring jail communications through unofficial channels, discovered the plan hours before its execution. They quickly organized a counter-operation positioning undercover agents throughout the facility. When Phillips made his move, directing the prisoner transport down the unauthorized corridor where Jasmine would be walking, FBI agents intercepted them. In the confusion that followed, Phillips panicked and made a critical mistake. He shouted into his radio, "Abort, the FBI is here. Proceed with standard prisoner transport only. Director's orders." The transmission went out over the jail's recorded communication system, providing clear evidence that Phillips was executing an unauthorized operation and taking directions from someone he referred to as director, someone with enough authority to countermand normal procedures in a county facility. With this new evidence and the files recovered from Sentinel's servers, Malcolm finally had enough to move against the conspiracy's leadership. But as he prepared his next steps, a new threat emerged. Victoria Chamberlain, realizing her connection to Sentinel might be exposed, began positioning herself as a whistleblower, approaching Malcolm with an offer. "I've been conducting my own investigation," she claimed during an unscheduled visit to his office. "I've discovered troubling connections between Sentinel and certain elements within law enforcement. I believe we should combine our findings and present a united front to the Attorney General." Malcolm recognized the ploy for what it was, an attempt to gain access to his evidence and control the narrative. He activated the recording devices hidden in his office. "That's very interesting, Victoria. When exactly did you become concerned about Sentinel's operations?" "I've had suspicions for some time," she replied smoothly, "but only recently obtained concrete evidence of potential misuse of their technology. Would that be before or after you received consulting fees from their subsidiary companies? Malcolm watched her facade crack slightly. Those were for legitimate advisory work before my current position. But in light of what I've learned, I now see they may have been attempting to compromise me. As the conversation continued, Chamberlain inadvertently confirmed her knowledge of Operation Neighborhood Watch, attempting to frame herself as an unwitting participant rather than an architect. Every damning admission was captured for posterity, providing the final pieces Malcolm needed to bring the entire operation into the light. Thunder rolled across the Atlanta skyline as Malcolm Taylor sat in his hotel room drafting his resignation letter. After 30 years in law enforcement, 27 with the FBI, he was preparing to step away from the career that had defined his life. The resignation wasn't real. It was a tactical move designed to create a false sense of security among his opponents, while giving him more freedom to operate without institutional constraints. The carefully worded letter cited family concerns and the need to support my daughter during her legal proceedings as reasons for his departure. News outlets would receive it tomorrow morning, creating headlines that would mask his true activities. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Agent Chen. Package delivered. Recipients engaging. The package was a carefully selected portion of the Sentinel documents delivered anonymously to journalists at The Washington Post, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and ProPublica. Rather than dumping all the evidence at once, Malcolm's team had strategically released just enough information to force a response from Sentinel and its government allies while keeping their most damning evidence in reserve. In Atlanta, Jasmine worked with a network of civil rights activists and underground journalists to prepare for the document release. Her experience as both attorney and victim made her uniquely positioned to contextualize the technical information about Sentinel's algorithms. These aren't just computer programs making mistakes, she explained during a secure video briefing with reporters. They're intentionally designed systems of discrimination cloaked in technological objectivity. The algorithm doesn't use race explicitly. It uses proxies like neighborhood demographic change rates and property value fluctuation concerns to identify targets. But the outcome is the same as the racial zoning laws of the 20th century, keeping black families out of white neighborhoods. As predicted, the initial story created a firestorm. Sentinel Solutions immediately issued denials claiming their technology was race-neutral and that any discriminatory outcomes were due to implementation issues at the department level. Police chiefs across the country held press conferences defending their use of predictive policing. Judge Whitmore gave a rare interview, claiming no knowledge of how the algorithms worked, insisting he evaluated warrant applications solely on the legal standards of probable cause. Most significantly, Victoria Chamberlain appeared on national television, portraying herself as a concerned government official who had recently discovered troubling questions about the technology. "I've launched an internal review," she told the interviewer with practiced sincerity. "If these allegations have merit, appropriate action will be taken." Meanwhile, in a secure meeting facility outside Atlanta, the actual architects of Operation Neighborhood Watch gathered in crisis mode. Police Chief Hartman temporarily reinstated Sergeant Phillips. Judge Whitmore and Richard Mercer, CEO of Sentinel Solutions, sat around a conference table reviewing damage control strategies. "The documents they have don't explicitly name any of us," Mercer assured the group. "They show the program exists, but not who authorized it. We stick to the official line. This was about crime prevention, not racial targeting." Whitmore nervously adjusted his tie. "What about the financial connections? If they trace the payments through the shell companies?" "All legitimate consulting arrangements," Mercer interrupted. "Nothing illegal about advisory roles and speaking fees." Phillips, less sophisticated than his colleagues, cut to the heart of the matter. "What about the Taylor woman? She's the face of this whole thing. Without her, it's just technical documents and conspiracy theories." The room fell silent as the implication hung in the air. Hartman finally spoke. "We handle this legally and through proper channels. The department will cooperate with any investigation while maintaining that our use of Sentinel's technology was appropriate and non-discriminatory. Any suggestion otherwise is the result of political pressure and media sensationalism." What none of them realized was that Malcolm's team had the entire facility under surveillance, every word being recorded and added to the mountain of evidence. Across town, Victoria Chamberlain arrived at Malcolm's hotel, requesting a private meeting. Malcolm's team swept the room for surveillance devices and positioned backup in adjacent rooms before allowing her entry. "Your resignation surprised me," she began, settling into an armchair. "I thought you'd fight this all the way to the end." Malcolm offered a carefully crafted performance of a man defeated. Some battles can't be won from the inside. The system is too entrenched, the power imbalance too great. I can better support Jasmine as a private citizen than as a director hamstrung by political considerations. Chamberlain studied him, looking for deception. A wise choice. Your daughter's lawsuit will proceed more smoothly without allegations of federal interference. She leaned forward slightly. I want you to know that I've initiated an internal review of Sentinel's contracts. If there was misuse of their technology, those responsible will be held accountable. That's very proactive of you, Malcolm replied, activating the recording device in his watch. When did you first become aware of Operation Neighborhood Watch? The slight widening of Chamberlain's eyes confirmed she recognized the program's classified name, information that hadn't been included in the public document. Release. I'm not familiar with specific operational code names. My concern is with any potential misuse of predictive policing technology generally. That's interesting, Malcolm continued, because I have documentation showing you attended the initial program briefing 3 years ago. Your electronic signature appears on the authorization for the pilot program in Charlotte. Chamberlain's mask of concern transformed into cold calculation. Malcolm, I've always respected you. Your rise through the Bureau, despite the obstacles faced by black agents, has been admirable. But you're overreaching. The documents you have are fragments of a much more complex national security initiative designed to identify genuine criminal networks. Any racial disparities in implementation were unintentional side effects, not the program's purpose. Is that the official position you're taking? It's the truth. And the only narrative that protects the institutions we've both served. Think carefully about your next move. Discrediting federal law enforcement agencies serves no one's interests, especially not the black communities you claim to be protecting. They need effective policing more than anyone. Malcolm let the statement hang in the air, its patronizing racism so casual that Chamberlain seemed unaware of what she had revealed about her worldview. I appreciate your candor, Victoria. It clarifies many things. After she left, Agent Washington entered from the adjacent room. We got it all. The acknowledgement of the program, the attempt to reframe it, the implicit threat. Combined with the financial records and the surveillance from the Sentinel meeting, we have enough. Malcolm nodded. Prepare the full package for release, all channels simultaneously. And make sure Jasmine is fully secured. They're getting desperate. The plan proceeded with precision. While Chamberlain believed she had convinced Malcolm to moderate his approach, his team executed the final phase of their operation. The complete Sentinel files, financial records, surveillance recordings, and Chamberlain's own incriminating statements were released to media outlets worldwide and directly to the Department of Justice Inspector General. Simultaneously, Jasmine held a press conference revealing the full scope of the class action lawsuit, now representing over 300 victims of discriminatory raids across 42 cities. The evidence was irrefutable. Operation Neighborhood Watch was exposed as a systematic effort to prevent racial integration of affluent communities through intimidation disguised as law enforcement. The algorithms had been specifically designed to generate pretexts for investigating successful black professionals, with success metrics tied to maintaining demographic stability rather than reducing actual crime. The financial trails connected police departments, judges, real estate developers, and federal officials in a conspiracy that had operated for years under the guise of objective, technology-driven policing. As the story exploded across national media, Chamberlain made one final desperate move, attempting to delete server records that would further implicate her. Unknown to her, Malcolm's team had anticipated this and were monitoring her digital activities. The attempt to destroy evidence was documented in real time, adding obstruction of justice to the growing list of charges that would soon be filed against the architects of one of the most sophisticated racial discrimination operations in modern American history. 6 months after the raid on Jasmine Taylor's home, a federal task force descended on police departments in 17 states, executing arrest warrants for 38 officials involved in Operation Neighborhood Watch. The coordinated dawn raids were deliberately respectful. No doors broken down, no unnecessary terror tactics, a stark contrast to the treatment Jasmine and hundreds of other innocent black citizens had endured. In Atlanta Police Chief Gregory Hartman was led from his suburban home in handcuffs as news cameras captured the moment. Sergeant Wade Phillips, attempting to flee to a remote cabin in the North Georgia mountains, was intercepted by FBI agents. Judge Harold Whitmore was arrested while preparing to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. Richard Mercer, CEO of Sentinel Solutions, surrendered through his attorneys after a brief negotiation. Most significant was the arrest of Victoria Chamberlain, the highest-ranking government official implicated in the conspiracy. The Director of National Intelligence was taken into custody at her Virginia estate, charged with conspiracy against rights abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, and lying to Congress about her connections to Sentinel. The evidence against the conspiracy was overwhelming. Operation Neighborhood Watch had targeted thousands of successful black professionals across the country using predictive policing technology as cover for systematic intimidation. The algorithms hadn't been designed to find crime, but to create pretexts for investigating minorities who moved into predominantly white neighborhoods. Success was measured not by criminal convictions, but by how many targeted individuals subsequently relocated away from these communities. The documents Malcolm's team had uncovered revealed the program's true purpose in the architect's own words: maintaining community demographic stability and preserving property values through cultural continuity, euphemisms, for preventing racial integration. 2 weeks after the arrests, Malcolm Taylor testified before a special congressional committee investigating discriminatory policing practices. His testimony walked a careful line between his roles as FBI director and a black father whose daughter had been victimized by the very system he had served for decades. "I have dedicated my life to the ideal that law enforcement can protect all citizens equally," he told the packed hearing room. What we uncovered was a betrayal of that ideal, a modern continuation of our nation's long history of using state power to enforce racial segregation. The technology may be new, but the intent was as old as redlining and racial covenants. When asked why such a program had been allowed to operate within federal guidelines, Malcolm was unflinching. Institutional racism persists because it adapts. What was once explicit becomes coded in technical language and hidden behind algorithms. What was once whites only becomes maintaining neighborhood character. What was once racial profiling becomes data-driven policing. We must be equally adaptive in identifying and dismantling these systems, regardless of how sophisticated their disguise. The fallout transformed American policing. The Justice Department launched investigations into every department that had contracted with Sentinel Solutions. Predictive policing programs nationwide were suspended pending algorithmic audits for bias. Police unions initially resisted, but found themselves unable to defend the indefensible once the full documentation became public. Civil rights organizations pressed for legislative reforms requiring transparency in policing technology. Victoria Chamberlain, facing decades in prison, attempted to bargain for leniency by revealing higher-level connections to Operation Neighborhood Watch. Her testimony implicated officials at the Department of Housing and Urban Development real estate industry lobbyists and several senators who had pressed for federal funding of community stability initiatives in their predominantly white districts. The resulting investigations expanded far beyond policing into housing policy lending practices and local zoning regulations that had worked in concert to maintain residential segregation. Malcolm was offered Chamberlain's position as Director of National Intelligence, but surprised Washington by declining. "I've seen how power can corrupt even well-intentioned systems," he explained in a statement. "Rather than stepping into that role, I intend to establish an independent oversight commission focusing on civil rights in the age of algorithmic governance. We need watchdogs outside the power structure, not just reformed leadership within it. Meanwhile, Jasmine returned to the home that had been violated months earlier. The community had rallied around her, not just with words, but with action. Volunteers had repaired the damage from the raid, installed advanced security systems donated by a Black-owned technology firm, and created a neighborhood watch program genuinely focused on keeping all residents safe, regardless of race. Most moving was the transformation in her neighbors. Mrs. Peterson, who had watched Jasmine's humiliation without intervening, now brought weekly baked goods and had become an outspoken advocate against police overreach. Other neighbors who had been distant now invited her to community events and spoke openly about confronting their own biases. Jasmine's professional life evolved as well. While continuing her civil rights practice at Henderson and Mitchell, she established the Taylor Justice Foundation, focusing specifically on cases involving technological discrimination. The foundation provided legal support for victims of algorithmic bias, funded research into discriminatory patterns in artificial intelligence, and advocated for transparency in government use of predictive technologies. Officer Leila Rodriguez, fully exonerated after the conspiracy unraveled, joined the foundation as lead investigator, bringing her law enforcement expertise to documenting cases of technology-enabled discrimination. The class action lawsuit against Sentinel Solutions and the implicated police departments resulted in the largest civil rights settlement in American history, $800 million, distributed among more than 3,000 victims nationwide. More importantly, it established legal precedent requiring algorithmic transparency in all government applications affecting civil liberties. Systems that couldn't be explained or audited for bias were declared fundamentally incompatible with due process. Beyond the legal victories, a national conversation about race and technology had begun. Universities established ethics programs in computer science curriculums. Technology companies formed diversity councils with actual authority over product development. Congress held hearings on the need for algorithmic accountability legislation. None of these changes would eliminate racism overnight, but they represented meaningful steps toward recognizing and addressing how discrimination had evolved in the digital age. 6 months after the arrests, Malcolm and Jasmine hosted a community dinner in her backyard. The guest list included victims from the class action lawsuit, reform-minded officers, committed to equitable policing technology, ethicists, and neighbors from across the political spectrum. As the Atlanta sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Jasmine rose to offer a toast. When I was dragged from my bathtub that night, I felt utterly powerless. But what I've learned through this journey is that injustice, no matter how sophisticated its disguise, cannot withstand the light of truth and the power of community. Systems of oppression rely on our silence and division. Our response must be voice and unity. The gathering represented something profound, not just the aftermath of a victory, but the beginning of a new approach to addressing America's oldest problem. As conversations flowed across tables with people from different backgrounds finding common ground in their commitment to justice, a final truth emerged. The raid on Jasmine's home had never really been about suspected drug activity or even retaliation for her legal victories against the police department. The final documents recovered from Sentinel's servers revealed that Jasmine had been targeted because she was completing a comprehensive study on wealth disparities driven by housing discrimination. Her research would have exposed decades of institutional practices designed to prevent Black Americans from building generational wealth through home ownership, the very foundation of middle-class prosperity in America. Operation Neighborhood Watch had targeted her not just to drive her from a white neighborhood, but to suppress information that threatened systems of economic inequality that had persisted long after explicit segregation had been outlawed. In the end, their attempt to silence her had amplified her voice and accelerated the very changes they had sought to prevent. As the evening wound down, Malcolm found a quiet moment with his daughter. "Your mother would be proud," he said simply. "She always said you'd change the world." Jasmine smiled, thinking of the woman who had taught her to fight injustice with both passion and precision. We've made a start, but there's still so much work to do. Yes, Malcolm agreed, looking around at the diverse gathering, united in purpose. But for the first time in a long while, I believe we're truly moving forward. What would you do if you discovered systems designed to discriminate against you, hidden behind seemingly neutral technology? Has this story changed how you think about algorithmic bias in your own life? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can ensure technology serves justice rather than undermining it. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to understand these hidden realities. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one woman's fight against modern discrimination, a fight that ultimately revealed how far we've come and how far we still have to go. Jasmine Taylor's story reveals how racism evolves with technology becoming more sophisticated, yet equally destructive. When discrimination hides behind algorithms and objective data, it becomes harder to identify, but no less damaging. The raid on Jasmine's home demonstrates how power structures protect themselves using modern tools to maintain historical inequalities. True justice requires vigilance at every level, from communities standing together against injustice to insiders brave enough to expose corruption from within. The story teaches us that accountability must extend beyond individual actors to the systems enabling discrimination. Officer Rodriguez and Malcolm Taylor show that ethical choices often come with personal costs, but remaining silent perpetuates injustice. Jasmine's transformation from victim to advocate illustrates how personal trauma can fuel systemic change when channeled effectively. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that seemingly isolated incidents often connect to broader patterns. What appeared to be a mistaken raid revealed a nationwide conspiracy to prevent racial integration in affluent neighborhoods. The lesson is clear: we must question mistakes that disproportionately impact marginalized communities and examine the algorithms, policies, and power structures behind them. Technology should advance justice, not disguise prejudice in complexity. Progress comes not just from identifying discrimination, but from rebuilding systems with transparency, accountability, and equal protection at their core. Has technology made discrimination harder to fight, or has it given us new tools to expose injustice? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever experienced or witnessed racial profiling, share your story with our community. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation. How do we ensure algorithms serve justice rather than perpetuate bias? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to join our community dedicated to exposing hidden injustices and celebrating those brave enough to stand against them. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination adapts in the digital age. Thank you for witnessing Jasmine's journey from victim to champion for change. Remember, the systems that seem most objective often hide the deepest biases. Together, we can bring these shadows into the light and build a more just future for all communities. Stay vigilant, stay united, and never underestimate the power of truth.